Welcome to episode 1 of Gear Breakdown. In today's episode, we're going to review and discuss the functionality and tech behind the SLS camera. In previous videos on this channel, you have seen us build our own SLS camera, and you have seen a little bit of footage that we have captured with our SLS camera. Today we're going to explain a little bit of how the tech works, and things you should and should not do while using this device, and really all the ins and outs of how this Xbox 360 Kinect really does all the hard work for us. What makes the Kinect so special and works in the way that we need it to? Let's go over some of the features that it has. Right here we have an IR emitter, an RGB camera, color camera, and we have an IR depth sensor, as well as on the bottom an array of 4 microphones. So how does this all work together? So going to the first one, the IR emitter emits a dot array. You may have seen it in a few videos if you've ever watched TV shows where they've had an SLS or an XLS camera. This emits a dot array that is in what we call a speckle pattern. And what happens is the processing in the Kinect knows the exact pattern and where it should be. That combined with the IR depth sensor, what that does is this tracks where they are. And based on tracking them on how they are, it between here and here and where the object is in the room, within, a certain distance, we'll say about 16 feet is max, is it will triangulate because it knows this distance and it's able to tell about how far it is from this, and then knowing this distance and that distance allows it to figure this out and allows it to 3D map. It's kind of weird, kind of complex, but that's what it does. And based on that, it can then 3D map an entire image, as well as show you what things roughly look like in night vision. Although if you're a little further away than a couple feet, it's not that strong of a camera to really see at night. Then you do have the color camera, so if you just have a regular light, you should be able to see where you're going fairly well. Now, the RGB camera is just a regular old camera. Now, this Kinect is version 14.14, so version 1. There is a few different types of version 1, and then there's a version 2. Version 2 uses a different mathematical equation for dealing with this, which is a time of flight setup. But in all honesty, for what we want, between version 1 and version 2, the only real difference is the ability to overlay the color camera on top of the depth view. And for us, we don't really care about that. So version 1 to version 2, not a big deal in difference. The only real advantage you have is version 2 is a lot more sophisticated and a little more accurate. But for accuracy, these things are pretty good. So how accurate is it? Well, it takes data 30 times per second. It emits the speckle pattern, flashing, 30 times a second, and this collects that data and triangulates the data of everything that it sees 30 times a second. Now, there is a huge database that is built into the SDK, which is the interface that Windows uses to know what a person should look like. And it has all kind of examples in there of different body types, different heights, different clothing, different poses, standing, sitting, all of that. Microsoft definitely went above and beyond trying to make sure this was able to find a human in just about any pose you could think of. Now, we will have some issues because technology is not perfect. It's only as good as, it was developed to be. And because it's no longer being developed, there is no more new data. So what we have is what we get. So you have to take anything you see with this and try to figure out exactly why it's showing up and being mapped. Anything from a reflection in a window to a mirror to the odd reflection off of a wall could be a statistical anomaly or paranormal. And you have to go through and figure out what it is not before you can figure out what it is. Now, the way this thing recognizes 3D shapes is through the deformity of the speckle pattern. And what we're talking about is the speckle pattern is a grid of dots. Well, if you know, when you shine a light around a rounded edge, it stretches. Same idea here. And that's how it knows that something has a depth or an edge or a curve. That is how it maps all that. Basically, that speckle pattern is all the data it needs. Now that we know a lot of tech background into how this device operates, what it sees, and how it calculates things, what does that have to do with the SLS camera? And how is this used? And how should we be using our SLS camera? Well, when opening up the Kinect Explorer D2D, we get the option of a few different camera arrays, and I would always use the depth camera that is required, and if you have an extra light, I would use the color camera so you can just see where you're going, because the infrared camera is it's pretty bad for seeing where you're going, especially if you're going to walk with it. Now, when you're walking with it, you need to be more controlled and deliberate with your movements. Because, yes, this updates 30 times a second. But if you're going to really quick go like this, you're probably going to trigger something in the software to think it sees an anomaly when it's just being overwhelmed with data. If you can just go slowly like this and let it constantly build and reposition itself, because someone may say, well, it's not meant for ghost hunting. True. Not meant for it doesn't mean it can't be repurposed for it. And when you look at the manual, it says to use this, it's supposed to sit above or below the TV, 2 to 6 feet off the ground, and a 6 to 8 foot open space. Well, you're not going to have that. But also, you don't need 6 to 8 foot of clear room because you're not playing a game. You need 6 to 8 feet of clear room to play a game, because that's where it's trying to see you. We're not looking at this to find us. Rarely are we going to be in front of the camera. So how do we mitigate anyone trying to call us out and say that the footage from here is either not genuine or not realistic because of the way we use it? Well, whenever you go somewhere, try to hold it as still as possible. If you see something map, try to interact with it. Even if you have someone else, try to go over by it, interact, see if something happens. Try to tell it to move or to do something. Or, best thing yet, take your hand, slowly cross in front of the cameras, make sure to cover both the IR emitter and the IR camera. This should create a quick reset and let it rebuild. If a stick figure still pops up, it's either still trying to map something it thinks is human, or there's just a really odd anomaly there. But if you had gone like this and it maps something and you reset it and it's not mapped, the software was just confused. We want to try to deal with making sure our software is not confused at any time. If we can deal with making sure it's not confused, it definitely brings more credibility to what we are trying to present. So how do you use these correctly in the eyes of most people? You turn them on, you set them down, and you let them record. Maybe you come back later. Check your footage, just like you do with a static cam. Maybe you catch something odd, something dances in front of it when no one's there, and then disappears. You'd be surprised what you could catch with these. In summary, the Kinect is a great piece of hardware. It can range from being a three-dimensional mapping technology to, ghost hunting equipment, an SLS camera. And always know to be vigilant and make sure that you are not overloading it with data with how you move. It is very sensitive, but even the best pieces of technology have flaws. And as long as you know the flaws, you know how to leverage your technology in the way that best suits it. So this is not good with movement. So just walking down a hallway is probably not the best thing for it. But slowly scanning a room and then repositioning it to let it sit somewhere is going to be perfectly fine. I'm Tyler with Paranormal Inquiries, and if you have any more hardware that you want me to do a tech breakdown on and explain the do's and don'ts and what we should do to help get better footage for everyone, let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, like and subscribe. As always, leave comments for anything you would like to see me build or anything you would like to see me review. Also, be sure to follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Thanks for watching.